Welcome to Freedom Fire podcast. Ann Gishuru, how are you?
I'm good, Anastacia. Thank you so much for having me back again. It's a joy to be back.
I'm excited. I'm excited to be having this conversation. Always a pleasure talking to you. And thank you for making time in the middle of the busyness.
Absolutely.
Right. Let's start by my people will already have known you from the previous conversation that we've had. But let's start from represented. What is represented? You're running a program called Represented. What is represented, and what would the audience expect to hear when they join you there?
So, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me again. I am excited, as I said, to be here. For those who may not have had the first podcast episode, I am a racial equity coach, and I support online business owners, predominantly white women who are online business owners, such as coaches, creatives, consultants, build businesses that are racially equitable so they can be intentionally inclusive. And so out of that work, I created a 10-week program called Represented, where I walk them through the process of discovering the biases that they hold, the belief systems that they've held. A lot of times, most of these people don't even realize that they're perpetuating systems of exclusion, racial exclusion. And so going through the program and really just having their eyes wide open, they're in a better position to do better. They're in a position to go like, okay, there's some work that I need to do here. And this is how I can begin to unlearn some of these things that have been inbred in me, and how I can do better to have more racial representation in my business and serving people who come from more racially diverse backgrounds.
Amazing. Why is that conversation important? We keep hearing people saying, I'm tired of teaching, I'm tired of this. Why is that conversation important?
This conversation is so important because, particularly, I can speak for us here in Australia, Anastacia, we are a multicultural nation through and through, but we don't see that representation when it comes to positions of leadership, when it comes to positions of influence and power and ownership. And it's so important that we're able to have that representation, because it allows us to then normalize seeing people who have been historically marginalized, in this case, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, holding those roles. And once we begin to normalize that, then we can begin to live in communities, in societies that are racially equitable. And when we are in racially equitable spaces, then we're seeing people from all backgrounds flourishing, thriving, growing, and not just the dominant culture that continues to grow and prosper, that we are seeing that this is shared, and that people from different backgrounds are also growing and thriving.
Amazing. Annie, does that look like organization intentionally bringing in people of different race, or does it include like people of different race that have merit? Because we get that twisted a lot.
It begins by specifically white people doing the work of understanding what racism is, and examining themselves and understanding what implicit biases they might hold. What are some of the things they might have been taught from childhood that they now have taken on board and have it's become a belief that is actually untrue, and how they may be perpetuating this truth into something that it is not. And so when they have that awareness, they're able to do better. They're able, particularly when you look at organizations, looking at the executive level, looking at the C-suite, looking at senior management, and seeing, hang on, we seem to have the same kind of people who are in positions of leadership. We seem to have the same kind of look and feel are we truly being as inclusive as we possibly can? And this is not just hiring somebody for the sake of the fact that they are of a different race, but it is hiring them because they do indeed have the qualifications. Right now, Anastacia, on the global stage in the US, it's an election year. And at the time of recording this, we're seeing Kamala Harris, one of the presidential candidates, being referred to as a DEI hire, which is deeply insulting because she didn't get there because of the color of her skin. She didn't get there because she's a woman of color. She got there by merit. She got there because she is qualified, highly qualified to hold that position. And yet it's been reduced to a thing that, we're trying to make things a little bit even and equitable, but it's by merit. And so that's what I go back to.
Yeah, interesting. We bring Kamala into the conversation. I have been disappointed by Forbes and the Australian media in times when they've represented her, and specifically a well-known individual who is a behavioral specialist, she's called, and apparently she reads behavior. And she tore Kamala apart in terms of the way she laughs and the way she present and the way she talks, and I'm like, what's going on here? But my disappointed was that it was picked by Forbes and they published it. So when are we ever gonna win this conversation? If institution like Forbes, that she has her opinion, and that's all well and great, she can voice her opinion and whatever. But for media to take that and run with it, and a media house like Forbes, that is in 2024 is quite disheartening. So Annie, in your space, what are some of the conversation for us as people who are coming from bodies of culture? What are some of the conversation we can take ownership of, and what is it that we can start to do, some really quick wins we can start to do to win with our allies?
Mm-hmm. So first, just to take a little step back to what you were saying about Forbes, Anastacia, this is where it is so important to have racial representation, to have people who are part of the publishing process, who come from different racial backgrounds, who are able to fact check some of these things, who are able to, be able to look at an opinion piece and go like, is this fair representation? Is this something that we are saying that is defaming somebody, that we're going down to their personality and how they do certain things? Is it a truth of what we're saying? And being able to represent people from a place of integrity. And this is where having that racial representation plays a huge and a key role, because with trusted sources, a lot of times people don't fact check. A lot of times people take what has been written as gospel and they run with that. And that is where danger arises, in that people believe what they have seen, what they have heard, and they go on and that impacts them in a certain way in how they look at somebody and how they view that person. And they create that prejudice. They create that implicit bias, and which in the long run leads to things like racism. And so it's really, really important that we are checking who are the people who are part of the publication team, who are the people who are making decisions. Do we have that racial representation? And if we do not, chances are we could be putting things out there that are not fully inclusive and could be hurting, other people, particularly those with marginalized identities. Now, when it comes to what we can do in quick wins, what I always tell my students, Anastacia, is you cannot rush the work of inclusion. You really cannot. And this is why this is work that is difficult to do. This is work that is often taboo. This is work that is viewed like, I don't see color, or we can't talk about this. I don't want to make this person uncomfortable. And we're just constantly submitted to systems of superiority, the dominant culture here being whiteness, because we never want to disturb that sort of hierarchy. And so it's not about quick wins, in my opinion. It's about what do I need to do? If I look at my circle, Anastacia, and I look at the people who are within my network, are they people from different backgrounds? Or do I just have white friends? When I look at the people who I am investing in, the people who I'm learning from, the books that I have on my shelf, where I'm spending money, again, is there a racial representation, or again, is it just the same dominant culture that I am a part of? And this is a question not specifically just to white folks, but to all of us. What systems are we perpetuating? Who are we elevating? And who are we kind of sidelining and keeping down? That's where it begins to do that personal audit where you look around, even your networks within LinkedIn. Who are the people who are your friends with? Who are you connected with? Who are the people you can call and they can open a door for you, or they can give you opportunities? Now, if you all look the same, if you gather at the table and you're all the same, there's some work that needs to be done there.
Right. And let's come back to us, because sometimes we can pull the ratio card sometimes very soon. And I do want to actually circle back. Let's get back to what you just said, because you did highlight there that we can't have quick wins. But what are some of the low-hanging fruit? And you did say some things like looking into our own our own friendship circle, looking into what we are consuming and all that. And I bet that's what I was wanting to ask. Thank you so much for that correction, that we can't have really quick wins in terms of inclusion and equitable inclusion, but we can really start the work from some level. Now, sometimes from us, sometimes it can look like an attack. And what I'm learning really quick, even as we talk about equity and equality, and whether that is from a gender perspective or a ratio perspective, if we don't bring the other party into the conversation and we exclude them from the conversation, we can never achieve. And sometimes when left wing goes too far to bring it to a political whatever, because sometimes we think about these things in compartments, but it's in the political hierarchy, it is in the institution, wherever it is that we are. When the left wing goes too far, there are also some impact into that, and we start attacking people as opposed to really advocating for what we really need to advocate for. What are some of those things that you notice, and what do we need to be conscious about when we are coming into the conversation, again, as people who are coming from the body of culture?
Absolutely. And I think one of the mistakes that we make is looking at this matter of race as a political thing. And a lot of people detach themselves. They're like, oh, that's political. I'm not into politics. I don't want to talk about that. But the thing is, matters to do with race are to do with human rights. This is social justice that we're talking about. And so it is not political. It involves us. As long as we are part of the human race, it involves us, because these are human rights. So that's one thing that we need to understand. The next thing is having a growth mindset and not a fixed mindset, because a lot of times there are things that we have taken on board that have shaped how we perceive certain people. We will look at certain people and we say, oh, they're lazy, they never do anything. They just are on the dole or government assistance. And when you have that outlook on people, you never expect much from them. And so when you have that fixed mindset, it stops you from growing. And when you can tap into, okay, there's a lot happening here. I'm hearing a lot about race. How can I begin to educate myself? What is a book that I can pick up that can begin to teach me first and foremost about the history of our country here in Australia? What are the things that I need to understand about our First Nations people? Where is the imbalance here? Can I go back to my history books and understand? It starts from having that curiosity, that desire to want to learn and to grow, because having a fixed mindset will keep you stuck. And that is something that will go on from generation to generation, and we will not make progress.
Mm, yeah, and important you highlight that. And true, not a political issue, but a humanity issue. However, we cannot have that conversation without saying there's the political, whole political aspect to it, because then that's the way policies, particularly that governs us, are made. And I want to come to a conversation you and I have had, and I don't know if it's in a podcast or we've actually had it privately, in the way that we experience, for example, racism very, very differently. The way for me I will interpret it and the way my child that I'm raising now will experience it is very different, because obviously growing up in Kenya and coming here as an adult, I often say I didn't realize I was Black until I stepped out of Kenya, because then that became a conversation. In Kenya, I was tribal and I knew which tribe I belonged to. But when I I stepped out of Kenya, then it was about my color and which race I belong to and all that. Whereas my son will grow constantly understanding that he is of a different color and of a different race and all that. So it's important for people to understand, when we get into the conversation, that we experience things differently. Even the way, having been brought up in Kenya and having been brought up in UK, the way we experience it, living in Australia and living in the States, we experience it differently. And our solution, though collective, have to really speak to the place you are at. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. And interesting, as a parent now who's doing this work, what have been your experiences?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question to ask. It's a hard one, but it's a beautiful question to ask. For us, Anastasia, we came here knowing our identity. We came here knowing who we are, and we came here as adults, international students coming here to study or to work. And so our identity had already been defined, through our growing up and our belief systems. And so it's the reverse that happened coming here, and you're like, hang on, there's a difference there. I am being treated differently. Opportunities are not as forthcoming as they were back home, where we all kind of look the same and sound the same. There's a difference here. I'm not seeing many people who look like me and sound like me, and so there's that inferiority complex that comes into play. And so there's a lot of mindset and systems that one needs to unravel, that one needs to kind of, how do I survive in this environment? And with our kids, it's different, because this is home for them. They are Australians, and this is home for them. And so it's bringing them up to be proud of who they are, knowing where they come from, knowing our roots. Like with us, my husband and I, we go back home on a regular basis. And so there is that knowing that Kenya is home. There is that knowing that this is where we come from. These are our people. This is our history. And so there's a pride that begins to, really grow within them deeply. And so when it comes to how one approaches matters of being excluded, being treated differently, it's when you know what is right and what is wrong, and you're able to, bring that up. But how you bring it up here in Australia is different to perhaps how you would bring it up in the US. In the US, it's very in your face, whereas here it is very covert. Take you a minute to realize, hang on, that actually what you did wasn't right. And what I always apply is a calling in lens. That is the way in which I teach this work, calling in somebody and saying, when you said that or you did that, this is how it made me feel. Perhaps that's not where you were coming from, but this is the product of what you said. Is there any particular reason that made you say that or led you to believe that about me? And having that conversation from that place. Whereas when you were referring to before, Anastasia, when you were saying people feel attacked, people feel like, oh my goodness, you're already labeling me something that I am not. That's not the kind of person that I am. And I think when we approach things from that perspective, it locks the opportunity for us to actually have an impactful conversation. And so that has always been my approach, calling in people rather than calling them out and seeing where that conversation will lead to. But it all begins by knowing who you are, being secure, and knowing your identity and being proud of it.
And that's actually quite powerful because the cancel culture. Talk to me about your experience and your take on that, particularly where racism is concerned.
I think cancel culture is dangerous in my perspective because it doesn't allow room for learning. When we immediately cancel people, particularly people who are genuinely making mistakes, people who say the wrong thing, they didn't realize it was wrong. They're kind of dipping their toe into this work of anti racism and immediately they're canceled. You say the wrong thing. You've caused harm. How dare you say this? You're racist. What you're doing is putting labels on people. And actually, that just stops them from engaging in this work. They're like, this is too dangerous. I'm not getting into these waters. This is too dangerous for me to be a part of this. And as much as I want to do the right thing, as much as this whole issue affects me as a human and my values, I just can't be a part of that. And so that is why I find cancel culture dangerous. It is something that actually works against the work of anti-racism. We're trying to bring people along on the journey. In fact, it was Ruth Bader Ginsburg who said that when you fight for something, do it in a way that allows others to come along on the journey with you. And so if you do it in a way that is making people feel uncomfortable, and this is not obviously the discomfort that comes in the realizations of doing anti-racism work. I'm talking about doing it in a way that where people feel attacked, where they feel judged, where there's all these feelings of guilt. If you do it in that way, you're closing the door. And so my perspective when it comes to cancel culture, it's dangerous. And we need to be aware of what the impact of it is. And once we are aware and we're seeing how it is working counter to what we want it to do, then we do better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I always say when people genuinely don't know, then we have a part to play to actually correct it and move forward. I actually had an experience, and I don't know if I've ever told you this experience, where somebody I knew, I had known them for a long time, and we came from a meeting, and then we had a conversation, and she said to me, "Oh, but you don't reason like other Black people." I was like, whoa. That is not a compliment. Hold off, because you just insulted my ancestral lineage and everybody who comes before me. Let's have this conversation. And to see the impact of that, because to her, she was saying it to compliment what she had seen, and she didn't expect it to be. And I'm like, no. But let's have that conversation, not to say, oh, you're racist and you're whatever.
Yeah.
It's just to do the correction. And so to me, I think we do have a part to really play in educating. Now, I'm going to ask you a question of a real scenario that is happening at this moment in time. A 13-year-old in a school where there's been some aspect of racism coming from the kids, and it's calling names like nigger, the N-word, and stuff, and they're not calling her directly. They're talking about niggers to each other. So in a way that they won't get in trouble, because I didn't call her, but I'm talking in her presence in a way she can hear, in a very derogatory way. And so she's been very concerned and not wanting to go to school, and has had a conversation. And then when the parents have reached out, the school have said, oh, we are running a session on respect. What's your take?
You know, My take on this has stemmed from somewhere. This word has been had somewhere, and the kids, it's entered the school system and it's now being used. And I think the powers that be who are saying, we're going to have a session on respect really don't fully understand the impact of that derogatory language, that kind of language, that term, that word, the history, what it means to Black people. And this is why, Anastacia, it is so important for people who are in positions of leadership, for people who are in institutions, organizations, for people who are holding positions of responsibility to do this work of anti-racism, because when you do it, you're in a better position to deal with situations such as this, because this wouldn't just be we're having an information session on respect when people are actually on an anti-racism journey. And this is not something that you take a course and it ends there. It ends after you've done represented after 10 weeks. No, this is just the beginning. It sparks something, it lights something, and you go on to, keep that flame burning. And so my perspective on what you've said is that these are people who clearly don't understand the history, the impact of this particular term, and their whole leadership team, the whole all those people who are in positions of responsibility need to undergo some kind of training. They need to understand the history and understand what racism is and how it happens, because a lot of times here in Australia, it's not in your face. It will start with something as small, and I'm putting in quotes, as that, but it is not small, because when we entertain such things, or we go like, we had a session on respect and we said that's a bad word, we shouldn't use it. But have we educated the kids at their level of understanding whereby this kind of language is totally unacceptable? And this is why it is unacceptable. And anybody who is found using this kind of language, these are the consequences, and it could lead to expulsion. When we put such rules in place and we're educating the people in the system who are the rule makers, the policy makers, and we're also bringing parents along on this journey where parents are being brought in, and it's not just a respect session, but they're being told, hey, this is what the faculty are doing. This is how equipped they are. This is what they're learning. And it is very important that at home, you're also cultivating an atmosphere where this kind of language, when you come across it, it is shut down immediately, but you're also educating the kids as to why not.
So what should the parent in this case do?
I think they should raise this with the powers that be. They should raise this with the school. They should say, well, a respect session is all good, but we need to go deeper. We're not scratching, we're barely scratching the surface. And so we need to go deeper, because these are wounds that will affect this particular individual. Could be a lifetime wound here. And so they should approach the leaders, the powers that be, as I said, and ask that this goes deeper than just a session on respect.
Right. Annie, at a personal level, what has been the benefit of you running this work?
The benefits have been so many. But probably what comes to mind right now is that it's allowed me not to be silent anymore, a bystander. I think there are many things, particularly being a migrant and a Black migrant at that. There are many things that you witness and you don't want to rock the boat. You're like, oh, I saw that happen in the workplace. I don't want to say anything because it might put my job at stake, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be labeled as the troublemaker. I really just want to blend in and belong, and I don't want to stand out for the wrong reasons. Doing this work has really given me courage. It's given me language. It's also allowed me to understand those who are not like me a little bit more and have grace towards them, and not just view them through a particular lens, but grace that they don't know and they need to know, because when they know, they do better. So yeah, it's made me not be silent anymore, and also embrace my identity a lot more. It's helped me view myself as somebody who is worthy to occupy that space. Going back to my roots, really personally, how I wear my hair. I wasn't one who embraced curly hair. I thought it was beautiful on others, but for me, I was like, nah, nah, nah. I'm not used to that. I don't even know how that looks on me, and how do I even maintain it? I don't have the education, the knowledge, and beginning that whole process of unlearning, embracing what is truly mine, and being comfortable with that. So it has brought so many benefits. The things that I read, who am I buying from, who am I learning from, what conversations am I having, how am I looking at the world, when I'm part of certain groups, who's missing from that group, who's included, who's not, who had that conversation, what does it tell me about them and their knowledge when it comes to this work? Gosh, I mean, Anastacia, I could go on and on and on. It has been profound.
Amazing, amazing. And how important is hair in the culture that we come from, in our own identity? In it looks so simple, but the fact that you need to get comfortable to wear what is so natural and what is us. It's interesting because we don't think about it, but particularly again when we are raising children here and the parents who are listening to us, it is a conversation you must have, and it's something you need to support them through, because hair is an identity, and it's interesting. What have been the challenges?
The challenges have been, for me personally, the fear
Mm,
of how am I going to be perceived? What are people
right.
going to think of me? Am I going to be seen as this radical, person who's emerging and trying to, cause trouble? Those have been the challenges, and the challenges have been more internal than external, because with the work
Mm,
that I do, I am being invited into spaces where people want to have me. People are signing up for my program because they want to do this work. I'm not going out there trying to appeal to the masses. I'm part
mm,
of communities where this work is something where they realize this is an area that I haven't paid attention to, and I want to do better. Who are the people I can be learning from? So that's where I'm surrounded by. So a lot of the challenges are more internal rather than external.
what will it take for you to take to the masses? You have a conversation that is important. You have a posture that is not activism. What will it take for you to step into the masses, because the mass do need to hear?
I think for me, Anastasia, it's always been taking baby steps. For me, I don't want to burn out, because this is work that you can very, very quickly burn out on. And so I'm pacing myself. I'm taking baby steps. But what has been really, really interesting for me this year, 2024, since I launched my podcast at the very beginning of the year, 1st of January, has been, the podcast has just gone out there and is getting a lot of views, is getting, people are beginning to hear this work, they're beginning to tune in. And so that has been my vehicle of getting out there through my podcast, Represented Podcast with Ann Gishuru, and getting out to the masses. But for me, to be quite honest, Anastacia, I've never really looked at it on how many people can we get along on this work. For me, it is who can I impact? And what will that impact be like? Because I don't want people just to listen and go like, oh, that was a great episode. Thanks, Annie. When's the next one coming? I don't want this to be something that is binged, but I really want people to be very intentional when they take the time to listen, and that they hear it over and over again to the point where they're like, I need to do something about this. It gets uncomfortable for them where they're like, I want to be in a better world, in a better society. What role can I as a person play? So it's not about the masses, it's more about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who hear this and actually take action.
Lovely. So, Annie, you will laugh at this and you will be very proud of yourself. I do a lot of work sometimes in rural remote, and I am in remote Borarura. You have never heard of that word, potentially. It is somewhere about 11 hours drive from Darwin. So that's how
Wow.
remote it is. And I'm having a conversation with the CEO, and she says to me, Anastacia, I know you. I've listened to an episode you've done with Ann Gishuru. And she went on to talk to me about the importance of diversity.
Wow.
And it gives me goosebumps. It was like, oh my goodness.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I had no clue. See, that's it right there. That is it right there for me. Oh my gosh. Wow. Just wow.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. So yeah, that's the impact of when we remain true to the cause despite the challenges, and really speaking our truth and honoring that and doing it in a way that is honorable. Because I think, as I said to you, it is the way you do it, it's the posture that you come into it with it, that is not an attacking posture, that is really honorable, that want to listen to both sides, and then can we meet somewhere in the middle? Can we actually learn from each other? And it's the same I'm learning when I'm in rural Bararura and I'm there with First Nation people, Aboriginal people, and in the way they do their governance, for example, it's very different from mainstream, but I need to sit and listen and learn and hear from it, but also to learn the history of the country that I've actually, in some ways, that I'm gobsmacked because I've never heard of that. You mean
Yes.
that? That's what happens. But also to see a people that have been traumatized in some ways that sometimes we don't sit and acknowledge. And we can keep on saying, oh, but they just need to do this, and we don't acknowledge that part of the trauma and what this has meant, this journey of anti-racism and the history of this country, what it has done to them. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And yes, people in Borarula are listening.
That has truly made my day. I'm so happy to hear that. And you're also doing incredible work. The spaces that you're occupying, Anastacia, the conversations that you're having, understanding, the challenges, the barriers, the setbacks that our First Nations people are facing is so key and important, because in order to contribute, you've got to be part of that conversation. You've got to be in community with people. And when you're in community with people, when you share a table, when you share a cup of tea, when you share a meal together, it is so much harder to misunderstand. It is so much harder to hate up close when you're in relationship with people face to face.
That is so true, and thank you so much. So as we come up to the closing of this, I work in spaces with the CEO and executive to really strengthen culture, organizational culture at board level, at exec level. What is it that because organizational culture, it's the make or break of an organization. What is it from a culture perspective that people can look at to do the anti-racism work?
Mm. It really begins at the top. It really
Mm.
begins at the top. It begins with the CEO. It begins with those who are in those executive positions in the C suite. And the reason why I say that is I'll use the analogy of a parent and a child. When you're trying to teach a child to do something, if you yourself, Anastacia, haven't done that, and you have a 2-year-old son, if you yourself haven't taught yourself how to hold that spoon, feed yourself, tie your laces, what it takes to actually move from point A, B, C, it will be very difficult for you to raise your son to be that independent, that fully thriving child, adult that you want him to be if you yourself haven't taken that journey. And so it is imperative for organizations, for those in the positions of responsibility, in power, in influence, to do that work. What does that look like? It begins by them doing that personal, taking that personal journey, doing that personal inner work themselves, looking at those biases that they may hold, doing that implicit association test, from Harvard, and saying, okay, I want to do this. Let me see where my biases lie. And then once beginning the work of unlearning and undoing, because you can't lead people if you yourself are blind to some of the things that you're doing and you have no idea of those biases, those prejudices, and dare I say, racist, tendencies that you have. You cannot lead them unless you know yourself and begin to lead them from a place where you're leading them from the front and really not from the back.
Right. Annie, if the work you've done this far is all erased and there was no way to recover them, what are the 3 key lessons that you'd want us to remember forever?
Firstly, that love is at the center of it all. I know that a lot of people say that, oh gosh, you can't just, love is not enough. We need more than just that. But I truly, truly feel, and as a woman of faith, that love covers a multitude of sins. And so when we approach each other with love, with respect, with grace, we allow for so much more to happen. So love would be at the top. Secondly, would be family. Family is so central, so key. How are we bringing up our children? What are we telling them? What are the things that we're passing on to them so that they can pass on to the next generation? And lastly, I would say being present with where we are right now, because I think we spend so much time consumed with what has happened or even what is to come. And in the doing of that, we miss the present right now, what is going on. So presence. So love, family, presence.
If people want to find you, where can they find you?
Best place is on Instagram. That is where I spend most of my time posting, teaching, sharing. That's Annie.Gishuru is my handle on Instagram. Or check out my website, annigishuru.com, and come say hi. If you've listened to this conversation, please, please, please drop a DM on Instagram. Let me know what your biggest takeaway was. But please come say hi. I'd love to hear from you.
Lovely. Thank you so much. As always, you are amazing. Loved that.
Thank you for having me, Anastacia.
Thank you. Oh,